Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome to the Snowmelt Briefing for Tuesday, May 10th. Hello. Did somebody have a question? Okay. Anyway, this is Tuesday, May 10th. We're recording this from the Joint Operations Center Tuesday morning, May 10th, 10 a.m. And we'll go ahead and get started with our snowmelt briefing. Just taking a look back at the last 7 days of observed precipitation, we looked about a we received about an inch or so, maybe some areas an inch and a half total from the central Sierra up into the northern Sierra and Shasta region and northwest Nevada. The precipitation did not was not as much as was forecast. There were some a little bit short there, and I just wanted to show you how to get to these from our web page. If you go to our precipitation forecast from that top menu and scroll down, there's an area here with verification, QPF verification. If you look back around the 6th of May last week, you can call up that map and you can see from the previous day's forecast, the areas shaded in green is where precipitation was over forecast, or over forecast, and then the red was under forecast. And you can go back and look and see what the forecast was prior days up to 5 days in advance of that. And then up here on this top right part in this area, you can advance forward and you can see the next day. So this would be ending Saturday morning at 5 a.m. and that forecast was overdone as well for a large part of the area, even just the day before. And then the next day things shifted east, but we still had over forecast for that central part of the Sierra and through Nevada. So that's a feature you can look at. And get back to the briefing here, and we'll look at some model data. This is the global forecast system model, the GFS, showing the 500 millibar geopotential heights, kind of that mid-level of the atmosphere, just to give you a sense of the flow in the atmosphere, and then the precipitation overlaid onto that. What this shows is we had our system right away at the first part of the loop is the system exiting through the Great Basin and into the Rockies. And then we have another system that comes in later for the weekend and just brushes by the north part of the area into the Pacific Northwest. And then finally, by the end of the loop here, the middle to late part of next week, you can see this big upper low that settles down just off the coast of California, Pacific Northwest. And that one, it's not clear exactly how that's going to behave. I think there's some differences in the modeling, both from previous days and also among the European model. And the ensemble of the GFS shows that these kind of lows tend to be somewhat unpredictable. They can be very slow moving though when they're closed off like that. So basically, if we look at the associated temperatures with this is the temperatures average from the surface to about 18,000 feet in the atmosphere, showing a deep layer there. Greens and yellows are the warmer temperatures, and you can see as we get some ridging into the later part of this week is when we have our warmest temperatures, and those get shifted eastward as a weather system comes in on the coast. And then as this big upper low comes in at the end of the loop there, you'll see that'll bring cooler temperatures with it, nudging into the area. As far as the precipitation for the next 6 days, just a little bit across the north part of California and north part of Nevada, probably not amounting to much more than a tenth of an inch or so for basin-wide accumulations. So really not much in the way of precipitation expected. Regarding forecast temperatures, another feature on our website you can look at. If you go to our home front-facing page, on the right-hand side, scroll down to forecast temperatures. And if you click this box here, basin observed forecast temperature plots, we can look at what used to be just in our own system we now make available here on the web. So you can go to somewhere like above Shasta there, click on that basin, and it'll pop up the plots that shows the past 5 days and the next 10 days of temperature. So this area here, past 5 days, and then the future 5 days, you can see the diurnal up and down. If you look closely, the white lines there would be the average temperatures for this time of year. And then the blue line across there shows the freezing level. And then the whole shaded area represents the climatological record extremes that have been observed during this period. So what stands out here is that over the next little bit here, we get into temperatures that are above average for the middle to later part of this week. And then as we get into the weekend, things cool down closer to average, but up in this area, still in this basin, staying above freezing for that time. If you look farther south in the Sierra, we'll go down and look in the middle part of the Sierra. So here's let's go a little farther south. So this is the Merced River, the upper part of the basin. Same sort of trend. We get into these warmer than average temperatures by quite a bit, not quite records, but pretty warm, and overnight lows staying above freezing in that period too. By the time we get into early next week, temperatures are looking much closer to average, with the overnight lows getting near freezing for the basin. And then you can also look at the lower or the middle part of the basin with warmer temperatures, and then the lower basin, but right now most of the snow is really going to be on this upper basin here.
Those minimums though are above the average minimum, which is what we saw in April. That kind of accelerates the melt a little bit.
Yeah, they do stay a little bit above above the average lows, not a lot, but yeah. And then we can check out one more area. If we look over in Nevada, here the Humboldt Basin, look at temperatures there. A little different regime, but still just getting this slightly above normal for the next couple days here, and then trending back down toward average as well for that area. As far as the Climate Prediction Center's outlooks for the next 6 to 10 days, on the left here is the temperature. Shows above normal for the Pacific Northwest, not much of a signal departure from climatology for much of the rest of the West. And for precipitation, they're also keeping that above normal in the Pacific Northwest. So climatologically, systems tend to affect a little farther north this time of year and get weaker, and that seems to be what's reflected here in these outlooks. Also, the 8 to 14 day, which is mislabeled down here at the bottom, but this is the 8 to 14 day outlook, maybe reflects that upper low that could work its way into here, keeping temperatures below normal and keeping the area somewhat unsettled as well. The experimental 3 to 4 week outlook from the Climate Prediction Center shows above normal temperatures for a good part of California and the Pacific Northwest, and above normal precipitation for the Northern California and Pacific Northwest, kind of indicating that we may not have much of a change in the overall weather pattern. And then the climate outlook, the 1 month for the month of May, just from the Climate Prediction Center, shows a similar pattern. They have, although they show the precipitation above normal farther south in this depiction. And then finally, the outlook for the 3-month period centered on the month of June. This is May, June, July. Shows a good part of the West indicating above normal temperatures, much of like what we've seen over the past year. Seems like we've been in a permanent above normal precipitation or temperature mode. And then they do keep it above normal for much of California, the Great Basin, Rockies area here, again indicating we might stay in a similar unsettled weather pattern for the West. Now going to our water resources page. from our front page on the right hand side, you can choose water resources, and we'll look at the plan view map of the what the seasonal volume forecasts are. And these are generally a little below normal or so in the northern part of California here, and then much more so as you get down into the southern part of the state. Some of this has already run off for the April to July period. If we look at the whole water year, it shows things a little closer to normal, and then somewhat above normal here in the Humboldt. Another product we can look at is the date of the forecast date of the peak flow, and these are not too surprising. What you're seeing is pretty much about now for Shasta, and then maybe later in the month up here in the Klamath Basin, and then for the Sierra anywhere from the mid to late part of May. And the higher elevations you go, maybe it gets a little later down here in the Kings, San Joaquin, and even for the east side for the Walker River, looking at probably early June for the peak, and also for the Humboldt, just higher elevations, and just take a little longer for that snowmelt peak in those areas. To look at some of the trend plots, just a good summary for that. If we go to the ensembles, look at this index for the Sacramento, which includes the four rivers, Sacramento, Feather, Yuba, American, and look at the seasonal trend plot for that just to see how things have been going since the first of the month. And basically it's been a downward trend since the 1st of May. Some of the reasons for that might be that precipitation forecasts that we had last week, as we saw, were a little bit lower, or a little bit too high. So the observed precipitation came in a bit lower. So that could have affected the seasonal trend plot. Also, I believe our forecasters have been adjusting the snow water equivalent and the snow in the model, and some of that has been downward as well. So that's reflected here in these forecasts. Not a big change, but the trend has been downward a little bit. And we see a similar thing with the San Joaquin. Similar trend there.
Hey, Alan, can you show the 2015 on that real quick?
And then a request to show the 2015, we might see a bit of a contrast here. We'll see when we call that one up. And yeah, that one was very low. So we're looking at a much better year this year. Last year we were looking at 19% of average, and this year it's closer to average at 84%. Still a little below, but much better shape than last year. And I guess we could look over in Nevada too, just to see the Humboldt. I'm not sure if we have anybody on the phone from that region, but we'll look here. See what the trend plots are doing there. That one's also trended downward from early in the month. Or actually, it looks pretty, maybe not as much change, a little bit downward, bouncing around. The other thing I thought I could show is the 4 blocks of 5-day runoff. Those can be useful to look at. So looking at Shasta region, and this kind of, if you look at the transition between the 50%, around the 50% exceedance between the green and the blue, it looks like that's really, showing it coming later in the month in that area. And if we sample down, maybe down in the American here, Look at that. We're probably could be near the peak now with things dropping off. And then if we look down in the high elevation areas um, for the Kings River, for example, that one shows the potential for higher runoff periods later in the month. But with these, if an upper low, with these upper lows coming through and moderating temperatures up and down, the peak could be sort of washed out, maybe a little flat. Hard to tell where it's actually going to be this month. And with that, I think we can get back to just maybe summarizing what we're looking at here. Basically warming to above normal from now for the next few days, and then over the weekend settling back to near average temperatures and into next week, and then potentially cooling off mid to late next week depending on what that upper low does. There will be a weak upper low system that clips the north part of the area over the weekend and early next week. Doesn't produce much precipitation. Maybe that's going to be what helps knock temperatures back down to average. And then this stronger low pressure system, nice closed upper low, settles near the coast the mid to late part of next week. But there's a lot of uncertainty as to exactly how that system's going to progress and where it's going to settle. And the April to July forecasts have trended down since the beginning of May. Again, adjustments to the model simulations, and I'll let our hydrologist weigh in here in a moment. And then again, the observed precipitation was a little lower than what was forecast last week, so that also helped drive those forecasts down. And then we're looking at peak runoff expected generally from about now in the northern areas to mid to late May for much of the central southern Sierra, and early June for the Walker in the east side, and also for the Humboldt in Nevada. With that, any comments from our forecasters on the runoff forecast? Looks like nobody's got anything to add. Any questions from folks on the line?
Well, this is Tim from Reno. I just called as the company call. I'm sure talking to Scott, but thought I'd check in and see if others are on the line and had some thoughts. Uh, I was looking this morning at the forecast on the east side, and I was a little surprised to not see much of any rises with warmer temperatures this coming week, and in fact, kind of the lack of diurnal fluctuation on the Truckee system anyway. Did anybody have any thoughts on that? I thought we were going to look into it a little bit more after the meeting, but I think y'all should look at it more closely.
Anything? Oh, okay. Um, Scott hasn't looked at that yet, but we can check that out.
Okay.
Yeah, get back to you. Any comments from? We've got our DWR snow surveys folks here. Any comments from you guys? Anything you want to add?
We have things to talk about. I'm not sure what the audience is interested in.
Yeah, this is the one of the main purposes of this is just to provide a forum in case there is any concerns anyone has or questions about forecasts or differences in forecasts. So if anybody has anything to bring up, go ahead.
This is Steve at Merced River. I'll throw something out there. This morning we saw a really big increase in the national flow over yesterday, like a 1,500 CFS increase. And it doesn't look like that's showing up in
So just to, we've got a little bit complex audio system going here. So just to repeat the question, Steve Haugen from Kings River was saying that you're observing higher flows that don't seem to be reflected in the forecast, basically.
Correct.
And Brett's here. I know Brett kind of worked that section this morning. He may have some comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think that trend is happening throughout at least the southern in the San Joaquin. I mean, we saw that in the Merced as well, big jump overnight. So Pine Flat's not alone, at least on the trend, like you were saying. But I don't have the forecast in front of me, but in general, I think the rises over the next 24 hours will be similar to the last 24 hours and steadily increasing over the week. I think it's kind of the trend for a lot of these forecasts, but I don't actually have the Pine Flat one in front of me.
That's okay. I was just kind of wanting to make sure I wasn't the only one seeing that. This is Nicholas Markovich from PG&E. We are starting to see accelerated inflows to Corette and Washon upstream of your Pine Flat Reservoir, Steve. But I also saw it this past weekend on the South Yuba into PG&E's Lake Spalding and Lake Fordyce. Not sure if it was due to maybe heavy localized precipitation from thunderstorm events or the additional melt of snow contributing to that inflow. So even as far north as the I-80 corridor. Okay. Yeah, you're showing pretty substantial. Yeah, we saw about a 1,500 CFS increase this morning. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we've got the DWR wants to weigh in here.
Hello, this is Steve Nemeth from Snow Surveys for the DWR. And the last couple of days, I've calculated the full natural flows for April and the water year to date. And regarding the water year to date numbers, the Sacramento region is at about 105% of normal. The San Joaquin is 105% of normal, and that percentage drops significantly in the Tulare Lake Basin, which is 75% of normal. So those are water year to date numbers. April, starting in the north again, is about 85% of normal. The San Joaquin, April, 110, and Tulare, 85% of normal for April. On a little smaller scale, within the Sacramento Basin, the Yuba River has the highest water year-to-date average at 117%. That's the same percent of average that the Tuolumne Basin has in the San Joaquin River region. And in the Tulare Basin, there's a very noticeable change within the basin, with the Kings water year-to-date at 90% of average, but within that same basin, the Kern through Bakersfield is 52% of average. For April, also in the Tulare Lake Basin, the pattern is similar to the water year. The Kings April 105% of normal, Kern 50% of normal. And I mentioned that regionally the water year to date numbers for the three main regions are 105, 105, and 75. Those percents are all higher than what we expect to occur on an AJ basis. And for more information on what we expect, here's Andy Rising of Snow Surveys.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, we put our B120 and WSI forecasts out yesterday. Hopefully most of you received that. Just some points of things of notice. we like to compare with the RFC. I know a lot of you guys look at both. So generally in the north, from Shasta on down to about the Stanislaus, DWR was a little bit higher than the RFC's forecasts. And most were within 10% though. We're getting closer the longer we go in the year. And then in the southern part from Tuolumne on down, except for the Kauai, the RFC was forecasting higher flows for the AJ numbers, that is. Kind of a recap of, Steve mentioned the flows that we're seeing, but the forecasts kind of mimicked. Our AJ forecasts in the north, typically 85 to 95% of average, so that's from the Trinity on down to Tuolumne. Our peaks forecasts were McCollum and Stanislaus at 96%. And then, as Steve said, it drops dramatically after that. 75% on the San Joaquin, 70% on the Kings, and down to 50% or so on the Tule and the Kern. So the snow and the precip definitely lacked down there, and it's showing. For water year to date, our water year forecasts, similar trends, but the early rains in the season kind of gave the water year percentages higher. So Trinity was 113%, or it stands at 113%. Sacramento at about 99%. And then all the way down through the Merced River, we're hanging right around 100% for the water year to date forecast. And below that it drops again. 75% on the San Joaquin, 71% on the King, and down to 50% on the Kern. So these are all kind of mirroring each other, the drop down there. And just thought it would be interesting to compare to last year, record-setting numbers in many parts of the state. The Trinity last year was 17% AJ forecast on May 1. This year we're at 94%. American last year 14%, this year 93%. San Joaquin 10% last year, we're at 75%. And the Kern 10% last year, and we're at 49%. So thank gosh for this year. I wish it was better, but it's quite a relief from last year.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Any other questions from anybody out there? Anything you want to look at in particular? Any last closing comments in the room? All right. Looks like we can wrap this up. Thanks, everyone, for dialing in.